We've got a battle between two of the top-ranked quarterback prospects in the upcoming NFL draft as Malik Willis and the Liberty Flames travel to Oxford to face Matt Corral and the 16th-ranked Ole Miss Rebels. What's up, everybody? I'm Sudu Upadea. You know, this matchup looks a lot different right now than I thought it would look coming into this season. I fully expected this Ole Miss offense to be firing on all cylinders at this point of the season, similar to what the unit was doing at the beginning of the season. And then on the Liberty side, I thought this could have been just as good as the team from a year ago. Last year's team went 11-1. Malik Willis, who led that team, was back, so I expected them to be, undefeated at this point. But that's not what we have, is it? The Liberty squad isn't the same one from a year ago. This year's team has already suffered a couple of disappointing losses. And then on the Ole Miss side, the injuries are just piling up on offense, and it's really limiting what that group can do, which has Ole Miss fans sweating a little bit about this matchup, especially knowing that former Rebels head coach Hugh Freeze, now Liberty's head coach, is returning to Vaught-Hemingway Stadium for the first time since his messy exit as the Rebels head coach back in 2017. That's because despite his failures at the end of his tenure in Oxford, Freeze did prepare his team to win some pretty big games while he was the head coach of Ole Miss. And with the success he's had at Liberty, just making that program a worthy opponent, those concerns from Ole Miss fans are understandable. Now, the biggest reason he's been able to have so much success at Liberty has been the emergence of quarterback Malik Willis. The Auburn transfer has been on a tear over the last couple of years, making him a darling in the eyes of NFL scouts. Willis is the Liberty offense. He's already approaching 2,000 passing yards on the season and has completed around 67% of his passes with 21 touchdowns through the air. Willis also leads all FBS quarterbacks with 684 rushing yards, and he's got 9 rushing touchdowns on the season. But he does have a pretty good surrounding cast. His backfield consists of running backs Joshua Mack, TJ Green, and Shedro Lewis. Each of those guys have shown the ability to impact the game this season. Demario Douglas is Willis's favorite target, and he's already hauled in 37 receptions for 562 yards and 5 touchdowns on the season. Then there's also CJ Daniels, who leads the team with 7 touchdown receptions. Altogether, those two guys have combined for over 1,000 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns so far, so Willis definitely has options. But whether the Flames win or lose will depend on Willis protecting the football and his ability to evade the Rebels' pass rushers. Speaking of which, let's look at the Rebels' defense. A week ago, that D came out flat against Auburn, giving up 4 first-half touchdowns. The second half, though, different story. Ole Miss only gave up a field goal and looked more like that defense we saw against Tennessee and most of that LSU game. And that's the defense I expect to see against Liberty because of the talent gap between these two squads. The Rebels have been very successful in getting to the quarterback this season. They're 16th in the nation for team sacks with 23 total sacks, and that's a bad matchup for a Liberty offensive line that has given up 29 sacks so far. That ranks 120th in the nation for sacks allowed. This is why Sam Williams, the Rebels' leader in sacks, will be a focal point for the Liberty offense, which should only open up opportunities for other guys on this defense to get after Malik Willis. Whoever's spying on Willis will need to step up in this one, and I think they're going to get more shots at him than a lot of people think. Now, Willis has also thrown 6 interceptions this season. He threw 3 each in 2 different games, and those games weren't against great opponents. It was MTSU and Louisiana Monroe, not great defenses. Now, I know Ole Miss hasn't really been a ball-hawking defense as far as interceptions are concerned, but I think in this environment, an SEC game with 20 or so NFL scouts, Hugh Freeze coming back, I think it's going to put a little pressure on Willis to be that guy, to perform, get the win for his coach, prove that he can win in a big environment, and of course, impress those NFL scouts. And I think if you start getting in his grill, pressuring him a little bit, you can force him to play a little hero ball, start making throws that he's not comfortable throwing, and that I think Ole Miss can exploit to get some interceptions. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Now, looking at the Ole Miss offense, it just keeps getting more and more banged up as the season goes on. Leading receiver Dontario Drummond got hurt against Auburn last week. He's questionable for this one. Even if Corral's other top receiver, Braylon Sanders, plays, he's nowhere close to being fully healthy. Then you look at Corral himself. He was already playing on one bad ankle after the Tennessee game. Then he injures the other one last week against Auburn. So the Rebs are thin at receiver. The offensive catalyst, Matt Corral, is hurt. And the offensive line isn't fully healthy either. So what's the key? run the football. It's a no-brainer. You have the third-ranked rushing offense in the nation, and you have to burn that Liberty defense on the ground in order to win this one. That means you're hoping you get the good version of Jerrion Ealy. He's been hit or miss recently, and then just letting Henry Parrish and Snoop Connor go to work. I do still think the Rebs passing game will play a part in this one, though. I liked how Ja'Cour Pearson really stepped up last week against Auburn. Totally expect to see that continue this week. Of course, Casey Kelly at tight end has stepped up nicely in the place of an injured Chase Rogers. I think he'll play a big role in this one. And then hopefully Ole Miss does get Drummond in this one, and maybe that draws some of the coverage from the other guys, and that'll open up some opportunities in the passing game. Looking at this Liberty defense, on paper, they are the 10th ranked defense in the nation. Linebacker Story Jackson leads the team in tackles, and he's quite arguably their best player on defense. Like Ole Miss, Liberty's defense also loves getting after the quarterback. The Flames have 27 total sacks on the season, and 4 different players have 3 or more sacks on that defense. But most of their games have come against opponents inferior to what Ole Miss sees on a weekly basis. So this will be a great opportunity, actually, for the Liberty defense to truly prove to the nation that it is deserving of that top 10 defense ranking. Now, what makes me feel good for Ole Miss is the fact that Liberty has given up 200 rushing yards in games against North Texas and UMass in back-to-back weeks, and I can confidently say the Ole Miss rushing attack is superior to those squads, so that's a good thing going into this game for Ole Miss. Based on what you've heard, I think you know that I'm going to pick Ole Miss. Look, it's not going to be as easy as it would be for an Ole Miss team at full strength, but talent and depth are going to play a large role in this game. I know Hugh Freeze has won everywhere he's been. I don't want to take that away from him. He's got a great winning record overall in his college coaching career. He's beaten teams he's not supposed to. Look at what he's done with Liberty, right? You got to respect him for that. But at the end of the day, I just don't think he's got the Jimmies and Joes to go toe-to-toe against Ole Miss and pull this one out. That's why if you were to ask me a score, I'd say anywhere from 38-28, 37-21, somewhere in that range. I think Liberty scores a few touchdowns for sure, but at the end of the day, like I said, Ole Miss's talent and depth are going to win this one for the Rebels. Contributing for the Ole Miss Spirit, I'm Sudu Upadea.